Okay, so this will be the May 5th, 2021 Select Board meeting, and we're going to start with, before we call to order the Select Board meeting, we're going to have a brief Water, Sewer, and Water Commission for Ann Wheeler at 41 Old Depot Road, and I see that Ann is present with Elizabeth. So I don't know whether you want to fill us in, Karen?
Yes.
Okay.
So Ann Wheeler and Elizabeth Warner came to the town with an application to connect to the water system, and that is in your packet. We have received the application fee and the connection fee, and they have also paid up front the reservation for the bond, the water bond. So everything is in order with this application at this time. I spoke to Elizabeth. So they have a failed well at this point at that residence. It's a single family. So this is an emergency connection. We do have allocation on our system for one ERU, which is one unit for this single family home. They're also considering in the future, and they have a designer and an architect looking at converting the single family home to a 3-unit down the road. So for the purpose of this application tonight, it is for one ERU for the single family home. Now, I've talked to Elizabeth and instructed her that when they're ready to convert, they will have to go in front of the Development Review Board, and they should come back to the town and request a change in allocation and add the 2 units at that time.
Sounds good. Yeah, otherwise, I mean, the logic of that is partly that otherwise you'll have to start paying on the other 2 ERUs right away. The only thing is, Karen and I have discussed this, and I think Karen has made you aware, and I think sounds like Michael Marquis is aware, you'll just want to make sure your line coming from the street to the house is set up with sufficient capacity so that you can carry those units. I don't know whether it's a different size line that would come in if that's the case or not. But because what you're probably going to want to do is to bring a single line into the house and then split it and have it metered with however many meters you break the house into. So if you have 3 units, you'll want 3 meters in the house, I'm guessing. And that would be something to talk to your plumber about too, just to make sure you're not having to redo plumbing. You know, once you have the line into the house, set it up so that 3 meters can be attached to it when the time comes, or 2, or whatever makes sense.
So the town does have standards for connection, and I have that information in my office and Elizabeth, and I will get that to you. As far as we know, Derek is lined up to do the connection, and he's very familiar with our standards here. And Michael Marquis will also designate what size connection that should be.
Yeah, I'm guessing the pressure is high enough so it doesn't really change the size of the line coming in much, but just let, I mean, Michael, if he's aware that you're converting down the road, then he'll think that through anyway, but just make sure that's covered. So currently we're looking for allocation of a single ERU to the home of Ann Wheeler at 41
yes.
Old Depot Road. Do I hear a motion?
A motion, sorry, so moved, sorry.
I'll second.
So it's been moved and seconded to approve a single ERU allocation to the residents at 41 Old Depot Road. And if there is no further discussion, or Ann or Elizabeth, you have any questions? All set?
Hang on. They're muted. Let me see.
Yeah.
There you go.
Didn't look like there were any questions.
We're grateful that we got on the docket so quickly, and if anybody wants to come and see what we're visioning for the future, we'd love to invite you.
Yeah,
I'm just
feel free to
curious,
stop by.
is this the house with the brick facade?
Yes.
Yes.
Josh,
is.
you really come see it.
It's a beautiful house. Yeah, no, I'd like to check it out. I've always been interested. Anyway.
I know.
So I'll stop talking. But so it's been moved and seconded to approve an allocation for a single ERU at 41 Old Depot Road. If there's no further discussion, then all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Good. Thank you. All right.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Take care.
Okay, you
Thanks
too.
again.
Bye. Okay, so that would complete our business for the Sewer and Water Commissioners. So we can now adjourn Sewer and Water and call to order the Select Board meeting at 5:36. And do we have any adjustments to the agenda, Karen? You're on mute.
I don't have any adjustments. Are you all set?
I'm all set.
All right.
I am just going to, I will briefly comment on, I mean, we can do this under other business, but I will just briefly comment on where we are with equity inclusion. We had a slow week last week, but I'll let people know where that is. So do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of April 21st, 2021?
Motion to approve the minutes from April 21st, 2021.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as presented from April 21st. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
You don't have to vote, Karen.
No, but so that includes the Planning Commission public hearing, is that correct?
Oh, that was a separate.
Yeah, we have to do
separate
that.
hearing. So
Yeah. Okay. So do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of the public hearing for the Planning Commission on April 21st?
So moved. Yeah, okay.
oh, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you. Okay, so warrants to the treasurer.
I'll make a motion to approve and execute the warrants to the treasurer as presented upon completion of review.
And I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to approve and execute the warrants for approval. So upon completion of review, so we'll now proceed to review them. Karen, we have two warrants,
We
one
do,
payroll and one AP.
correct. So payroll warrant dated May 7th, 2021, in the amount of $17,547.69.
Any questions on that?
No, I'm good.
Eileen, you all
I'm
set?
good. Yeah, I'm good.
All right, so the AP warrant,
Accounts payable dated April 24 through May 7th, 2021, in the amount of $57,036.38.
So what is Best Septic Service doing for us?
That's septic. Well, I imagine they were pumping something somewhere, but hold on a minute, let me see.
That was for that old depot clog that they had.
So it was on the sewer system, but it was
Yeah, it was at the pump station
okay.
at the end of Old Depot Road.
all right. Any other questions about the, just the, independent?
It's just a general question, Karen, that we pay Simons about $10,000 every 2 weeks, roughly.
It's once a month.
It's a month. Okay,
Yeah, so we have a sewer contract with them,
great.
and then we have the water contract. So they're two separate contracts. Plus, we're paying for that truck, the pickup truck that Joe has.
Is there any competition for their service? I mean, I don't have any means of judging that, but it seems like a tremendous amount of money. But
For what they do,
yeah,
and when we run into an emergency,
no.
yeah, I mean, I can talk to other towns, but they're,
Just curious.
yeah.
We haven't explored putting that out to bid in a long time. I mean, they are, I think, I mean, one, we've been very happy with their service year after year.
Yes.
And they do an annual increase, but it's reasonable. I mean, it's what it is.
3%.
I don't think, and I may be totally wrong, but I'm not aware of anybody, David, who would provide that type of custom service in that way. But there may be people out there. I mean, I think we've talked about before, we used to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Right.
But the problem with that is that as it's gotten more complicated, you have to have people trained up for all sorts of different things. So you really have to have, at least, and of course, given the nature of the business, there's got to be more than one person that are trained to a level, because you have to be able to depend on them sort of.
I remember when Archie was doing it, and it's just kind of doing my job and seeing if we thought about this. And I'm not complaining, I'm not upset. We spend a lot of money on it, so.
Yeah, no, and I mean, given that we haven't looked at it in a long time, it would probably be worth exploring. Again, I'm not aware of anybody else who does it, but there must be others. So
That's it. That's the only question I had. Yep.
good.
Well, I just want to say
maybe before we renew the contract with them again, Karen, or maybe not before, because that's a first of fiscal year contract. Is that correct?
Yeah, we would have to do it prior to budgeting.
Yeah. So maybe before, this summer, let's explore that a little bit and just see what's out there.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I would just add that it's really important to have properly trained and experienced professionals running the sewer plant, because if the state finds out we're letting something into the river that we shouldn't, that's big trouble.
Yes. No, and they also do our water system, and they also they treat us well. I mean, they deal with the pool for us. They do all the adjustments in the water. They've been very good. I don't think I have any reason to question the value of their service. I think it would be a question of whether there's others that provide an equivalent service and what the pricing would be. So
I actually do have one more question, and that is, what's the Firematic $4,500 would we get for equipment at the fire station?
It's more fire gear.
More fire gear because of more firefighters, more people?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, got it.
Karen, you were trying to say something.
I just wanted to say thank you to David for, bringing up, the cost, of a contractor to maintain our system. And also, even though it's user-based and paid for, it's still a lot of money, like over $100,000 a year. And, that's not a small number, but again, like you said, Josh, they do all the testing, they do all the state, reporting. And anytime I need any numbers, I can just call. Joe just helped me with a renewal for a discharge permit that's sitting on my desk waiting for the check that's in this package here today. And, the permit has to be renewed every 5 years. And I'm looking at it with deer in the headlights going, I've never seen this before, and it's like, so Joe came to the rescue. He goes, oh no, he goes, I'll help you with that. And I'm like, okay. So we got it pulled together, and it'll go out tomorrow. And, but That's, they're very helpful with stuff like that.
Yeah. The other significant value, and of course we've talked about this with other folks we contract with, is just their familiarity with the system. I
Yes.
mean, it's not a simple system. Particularly the sewer part of it is aged enough so that knowing some of the nuances of it is a helpful thing. But
Yeah.
but you're right, David. We should explore it. Okay, so
Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I would just add, and by the way, I do not have any connection with Simon Services, and but I would say that it seems to me that actually we're not buying money. What we're buying is excellence in the operation of our water and sewer systems, and it seems that is what they are delivering. So that certainly is in their favor versus any competitors. We are very satisfied with their service, which is actually a very important service.
Yes.
Because similarly, if our water goes bad, the state will be on us, and so will everybody who's got water service.
Yep. Point well taken. Thank you. No, and I mean, we've been with them. I think it was in my first or second year that we actually decided to contract with them. That we had them do stuff for us before that, but then we went into a full-blown contract with them more than a dozen years ago, I think. So it's been pretty regular. But anyway, it's been moved and seconded to approve the warrants as presented upon completion of review. We have reviewed them, and so unless there's any further questions, all those in favor? Aye. All right, thank you. Public comment on items, not on the agenda. Does anybody have any public comment?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
Two about broadband internet. The first one, I've been busy with a lot of things, and I'm not sure whether I ever reported back. A couple of meetings ago, there was a question about Wi-Fi hotspots, and I said I would look into it, and I've forgotten. Did I ever report back on that?
This was the one that seemed too good to be true. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about the one where they said, some agency is saying, hey, we've got a deal. You can get a hotspot right now.
That
Right.
one, yeah.
That's
We do have an agenda item on broadband update that might be a better place for that.
Well, it might be, but as I've already begun, and this is very brief, if I may.
Sure.
Because it's actually not related to what Ms. Trowbridge is here for. This is a couple of, as one says in parliamentary terms, points of information. So that one, the hotspot, the library got one, and they got it for free. It's a white box that's on the southwest corner of the reading room outdoors there. You can see it. They put it out there so people could use the internet outdoors during the pandemic. And it's connected, the library is connected to a statewide high-speed Vermont Fiber Connect network. So that's great, but if you put one on anybody else's building, the question is, do they have fast internet, and would they like the public to share it? So to my knowledge, the only place in Putney that seems to be apropos for that is the library, but if anyone knows of any other, well, great, bring it up and maybe we can get another free hotspot. The other thing is the question of a Starlink satellite has come up. And for those who are interested, I was just looking a few minutes ago at the PCMag.com website, which is one of the most authoritative on the internet regarding business and personal computing. Their lead story is about the performance of Starlink satellites, which are now in beta test. And I bring it up because one of the counties they tested was Windham County. And you can see some interesting information there. I don't need to go into it, but anybody who wants to. But when I looked at when the home page popped up, that was the story that came on my screen. Thank you.
And you don't need to comment a whole lot, but is it seemingly a good service with that beta testing, or do we not know yet?
Well, the thing is, it's in beta testing, so the answer is no, we don't.
Right.
The alpha testing is when you do internal testing. Beta testing is when you let the public use it as is, and then that's when you really find out whether it works or not. Right. Simply because you've got thousands or millions of people trying it on all possible combinations of hardware and software. And whatever you overlooked is certainly going to be coming up. So it's like the difference in terms nowadays, a clinical trial on a COVID-19 vaccine versus administering it to the general public.
Right.
Because remember, the vaccines are still under emergency use authorization. They've not been approved yet. And by the way, I'm all in favor. I got mine on the first possible date. But so that's the analogy. Now, what they found was that Vermont had some of the highest, Windham County had some of the highest Starlink download speeds in the country. It was 93 megabits per second measured with Ookla speed test, which is a standard speed test application. And that was among the best in the country. The only drawback, as always with satellite service, is latency, which is the time from when you send a request for a web page, say, until it comes back to you. But there is one thing that gets overlooked, and that is when I do a terrestrial test, living where I do, I have Consolidated Communications. It hooks up to a server in Albany, which is a lot faster, is a lot slower latency, which is also known as ping, than if I tested it, say, to London or to San Francisco. So in that respect, you know, the satellite is 22,000 miles up in a geosynchronous orbit. That's just the way they work. So latency actually on terrestrial internet is a lot more than we think it is, because when we run a test, we're always going to a server which is relatively near where we live, within 200 or 300 miles, not 22,000 miles. Have I been clear?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I have one quick question about the hotspot. I mean, one of the questions when we first talked about that was, that unit was provided free, but then presumably somebody has to pay for the data. Is that correct?
Well, no, not at the library. The library, the internet connection of the library is part of the library budget. So when we're using the library internet, it's simply, it's exactly equivalent to going in the library, but since people couldn't do that, they put it on the outside of the building. People can sit in the parking lot and connect to the library's internet.
Right, but somebody is paying for that. I mean, we in fact are paying for that through supporting the library budget. So it's not something, because that's what, when we first talked about it, sounded too good to be true, and I think it is that if somebody were to have one of these hotspots, it would be dependent on their internet, and therefore they would have to pay for the data volume, correct?
That's right, Mr. Chairman. The only thing that was free was the white box that you can see on the side of the library, and I guess they sent a technician to install it for free also. But right. Beyond that, you know, they hooked it up to the library's internet, and the rest is up to our library budget.
Yeah, no, I mean, that sounds like a very appropriate place for one, certainly. So that's good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other comments on items not on the agenda? I don't see anything in the chat. So we will move on to select board items, and first would be Jane Kolias. I hope that's the pronunciation. Appointment to Wilson Wetland Stewardship Committee.
I'm not sure if Ann Carey is in this meeting or not.
I don't believe so. She usually comes on via phone.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
Mary's here though.
Yeah, she's great.
Good.
She has, I don't remember the name of her degree, but she also has a degree that relates to the wetlands and environmental. We're going to go on a tour the end of this week of the wetlands, so I can show her all the different parts. But she's already been involved before being on the committee in terms of like the beaver rescue and just keeping an eye on things down at Sand Hill. I mean, just observing, not really doing anything for the committee. But so I know Anne feels strongly about her. Does, Anne wondered, did she need to be approved by you folks since it's a committee of the Conservation Commission?
My opinion would be yes, but I'm not 100% sure. I think what we would consider this to be, Mary, would be a recommendation from the Conservation Commission to appoint Jane to the Wilson Wetland Stewardship Committee. Does that sound right, Karen?
Yes, that's.
And the Conservation Commission already voted approval of her.
So we'll accept, we will take that as a recommendation to the select board, because I don't believe you have the authority to actually appoint her to that committee without select board approval. So,
Okay.
but do I do it? So I'll just quickly read, there's a letter here from Jane, and I'm not sure I have it complete, but hi, Anne, thank you for the invite to join the Wilson Wetlands volunteer team. I think I'd enjoy helping out, and being new to Putney, it would be a great way to meet other folks in the conservation community. I will share a bit about myself below, but first I'll let you know that Rich and I retrieved the game camera yesterday, and there were several pictures of beaver along with muskrat, raccoon, and a few waterfowl. If you'd like to drop the thumb drive off at our mailbox, I will transfer the pictures onto it. We did notice the second camera down there, which looks like it's in a great spot to capture some action. All right, so that's all I have, Karen, unless there's more from Jane.
I do have a second page. It was double-sided, and I apologize to the select board that I didn't.
I think we got the full email. I read the whole thing.
Okay.
There was some credentials and other
Worked on
qualifying stuff.
different conservation organizations, New Hampshire School for Field Services, New Hampshire Parks, AmeriCorps. There's an MA in Earth Literacy, Environmental Studies with a focus on socio-justice issues. So, yeah, it sounds like she's a good match for this committee.
We're getting a bunch of background noise from somewhere, or I am. If folks could mute themselves if they're not on, that would be good. Might have been from you, Mary. All right, so do I hear a motion to accept the recommendation of the Putney Conservation Commission to officially appoint Jane Kolias to its Wilson Wetland Stewardship Committee?
I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation of the Conservation Commission to appoint Jane Kolias to the Wilson Wetland Stewardship Committee.
David seconded that, although he seems to be on mute also, but that's okay. But I got it anyway. So it's been moved and seconded. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Jane, for your willingness, and we look forward to meeting you.
Thank you, Mary.
Yes, thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
All right, Affordable Housing Committee appointments. So
can I just jump in? So back on March 10th, the select board voted as a slate for many different committees. And Pip Bannister, Michael Maricki, Eva Munden were on that list already. And Jerry Hyam also. So Josh, you would be the fifth person that was approved as an appointment back on March.
What I told Mike is that I will certainly happily function as the select board representative. I'm stretched pretty thin, so I don't know that I will attend every meeting, but I will do my best to and sort of be the point person on the select board. Just for background, this is a committee we've had for a number of years. Pip, Mike, and Eva have all served on it consistently whenever it's sort of cycled on and off somewhat, but they've all been on it, and Jerry would be a new addition. So So if somebody wants to make a motion to that effect.
So I'm not sure, do we have to make a motion?
It's already been,
We've already done it?
Done on March 10th.
Oh, okay, including Jerry?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. So,
Yeah.
all right, then we don't need a motion.
So just, go and do good work.
It was part, yeah, exactly. So that was all part of that slate that we approved.
Correct. And I didn't know that until today, but we are still going to look for one more person. So we could have a 5-person committee.
Yep.
With you as a liaison.
Sounds good. So anybody out there looking for something to do?
Something important.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Sorry, let's see. So broadband update. So I'm guessing we will go first to Core for that. And maybe straight to Steve and John too.
I'll just get us started and then I can turn it over to Stephen.
Sounds
Sure.
good.
All right, well, we're here with an update for DV Fiber, which is the business name for the Deerfield Valley Communications Union District, or CUD, you might have heard of. And just a reminder about why Putney wanted to join this. It's an opportunity to benefit from a publicly owned and controlled communications infrastructure, fiber to the premises, with no cost or liability to the town. And this is made possible by all the towns in the region. This is 23 towns now in Windham County and some of Bennington County that have joined together and to make this possible. And one of the things, the recent thing that's happening is that Brookline is considering joining tonight. And that's a town that backs up against Putney, as you know, in some of the unserved areas. So that's another good step in the right direction. The last time I was here, we talked about House Bill 360 passing with $150 million for broadband. And that is now before the Senate. And that's going to be decided soon. And funding like that is what's going to make this project possible and to go fast or faster. The last time I was here, I was reporting that our RFPs that were posted by the CUD were going to be received March 31st, which they were. There was multiple responses were received, and a handful of them were for the entire scope. And the scope of the project, again, is phase 1 is 6 or 7 towns that have no cabling whatsoever. And then phase 2 is towns like Putney that have some cabling and some unserved areas. And so that's where we are right now, is that the board, the governing board, which I'm on behalf of Putney along with Mike Merwicki, is considering these RFPs and what each of them offer in terms of timing, what they provide, how much control they provide, is there any opportunity for public ownership, and cost, of course. So one of the things I wanted to have Stephen here, who is the vice chair of the project, is to kind of tell you a little bit about some of the choices that we have and get your feedback. And I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about how best to communicate with the residents of the town. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephen.
Good.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to join you tonight. I'm really mostly interested in answering your questions that you may have, to the best of my not only knowledge, but the best of my ability to communicate publicly about certain matters under negotiation right now. You may also be interested to know that I was the head of a local committee in Marlboro that still exists, actually, the Marlboro Committee for Universal Broadband, that has spent the last 10 years or more trying to get improved internet connectivity to Marlboro, and we've certainly not done very well. And we went through the experience of trying to we did in fact issue our own RFP. We were following Chesterfield, New Hampshire's model, in case you are familiar with that, a public-private partnership with contract with CCI, Consolidated Communications. And we issued that RFP, and we received proposals in response, and the committee considered those and recommended that Marlboro not accept any of those proposals, largely because Marlboro could not raise the money that was required. These projects are expensive, and they usually require initial capital investment. And the great advantage that the towns of New Hampshire have at this point is that they can float a municipal bond, either taxable or non-taxable bond, for that capital expenditure on infrastructure such as this. And that avenue is not available to any town or the CUD, for that matter, in Vermont. Our source for municipal bonding would come later, after there's an established stream of revenue and a proof of stability over 2 or 3 year period before we could go to what's called a revenue bond market as a communications union district. There are, of course, other sources of grants and loans available otherwise in the interim, but the big question is how much money is going to flow from the federal government through the state to support broadband and, in fact, universal accessibility and affordability to everyone and every premise in Vermont. And that's the purpose of the CUD. I think I'll leave it at that. Maybe you have some questions or some things you'd like to explore.
Can you, I'm assuming this is of public knowledge, the cost that for the proposals for Marlboro, what kind of ballpark were we looking at?
Yeah, good question. It was, in fact, there was great agreement among the various proposals about the total cost. It was around $3 million. And we have 60 miles of road. And the pivotal considerations for Marlboro, besides the question of capital investment, we were required, in some cases, anywhere up to $1 million in terms of preparation costs or make-ready costs and so forth. There also was a minimum requirement expectation that we would have sufficient number of customers. And of course, population density is an issue in Marlboro. And so we were certainly contemplating trying to get together with Halifax or some neighbor to try to get a sufficient critical mass to make it happen. And that's what led us to be one of the original founding towns for the Communications Union District, Deerfield Valley. We thought that, and I think rightly concluded that it was a better chance of working together to get sufficient funding and have it happen. Also, the people of Marlboro, at least the committee I represent and the select board, was very much in favor of some sort of public control or authority, because we were very concerned because of our previous experience with the private vendors that the introductory offer of such and such a fee per month could be very attractive initially and then could go way up. We recognize we're not in a, we're not like Brattleboro where there are enough customers to support competition between Consolidated Communications, which is now providing fiber in Brattleboro, competing with Comcast's cable. So anyway, that's maybe a long-winded answer, but we had to come up with some money and we were never contemplating funding the whole proposition. So there was an opportunity in one proposal that we could perhaps own it on a depreciated scale over 20 years or something, so that we might be able to raise the money in the future to buy it and control it. But we really didn't have a business feasibility model that worked for the town by itself. On its own.
We have a similar amount of road, a little bit more than you, but I think our population is quite a bit higher. What's your total population?
Let's see. Let's see. You got me. It's a little over 1,000.
Oh.
Yeah, and our density on road miles actually throughout the CUD, throughout the 23 member towns we have, is certainly sufficient. But in these most needy and call me needy, sorry, underserved or unserved towns, we're barely approaching 5 premises per mile. And so, people have been desperately trying various alternatives. I appreciate Mr. Fairman's comment about the satellite, because we do have members of our board who have been part of the beta testing to see if that really is a viable option for them. And I have a member of my committee locally who's signed up and testing it, and it works great when it works. It's just that there's these drops because there aren't enough real satellites up there yet in the Starlink system to have a continuous, dependable coverage. And depending on how many people are online, that also affects the situation. And these satellites this Starlink is certainly a promising possibility for some of us who want to cut down enough trees to be able to get the view of the satellites, and also are willing to look forward to the time when there are enough satellites up there at a low orbit. That's why the latency is not as bad a problem with this satellite system that Musk has, that Starlink has, compared to the geosynchronous orbits, because they're only at about 1,500 miles rather than 22,000, and they're not geosynchronous. He plans to put up so many satellites that there's one going over all the time, close by. It's an interesting system, but certainly not a proven one. And the feeling about the board and the vendor committee representing our negotiating team with these various possibility vendors' proposals is that fiber is worth the investment for the future, because it's the long-range future with the capacity to serve our future needs, not just our present needs or our present aspirations.
Thank you. David or Eileen?
How many towns are involved now? 23? And when we talked last time, how many?
The most. Well, the business plan that WRC, got a broadband innovation grant from the PSD to pursue on behalf of the county, did a feasibility study first, a survey of interest, and when that proved to be sufficient, then they did a feasibility study regarding a business plan. And the business plan involved 15 member towns at that time. Originally, we had 5 as of April last year, but more and more towns have decided that this is a low-risk situation, and there's everything to be gained from being part of a larger group that has one mission, and that is to get everyone connected by high-speed internet. And since we have no taxing authority and no way of holding anybody liable, it's certainly a promising prospect if the initial capital, especially if the initial capital is available through grants and would secure public authority and ownership over the infrastructure.
David, to answer your question also, we're up to 23 towns. Isn't that right?
Sure, yeah. Towns have just joined last month at our meeting. And the towns there, I would add too, there's one other town that people tend to forget that's in Windsor County, and that's Weston. That's also a member town.
We're also working in conjunction with the CUD in Bennington County.
Yeah, we have
So-
a liaison. We have a liaison committee, a liaison group that's working on how we can coordinate our efforts. There isn't yet a sufficient reason to combine or join, except in a parallel fashion regarding joint contracting for pre-planning or something like that. But it certainly is would be logical for all of southern Vermont to be served as a contiguous unit, and that would provide greater resiliency and redundancy in terms of the design structure for engineering.
Something that we're interested in hearing from you tonight is your priority or the town's priorities for a project like this. If you would consider speed and cost to be the highest priority, or public control and customer service, those kind of factors, if those would be just how you would rate something like that.
So how about timing? When we talked about this last time, I think I remember this correctly, and if I don't, I'm sorry, but because you want to provide service to the under or non-served areas first, the projection was that Putney, having some service already, would be many years out in the program.
I think Cora can report what the actual business plan said at that time. Things have changed regarding the availability of funding, because money talks and money gets the action. And we have viable proposals that, frankly, we wouldn't have received 6 months ago. And Peter Welch advises us that there's more money coming in addition to this ARPA money for broadband. And so there are lots of attraction to these rural extensions and infrastructure. And so we're in a stronger position than we were when I spoke to you, for sure, before. Now, I'm not prepared because negotiations are not completed, nor contractual stipulations and insurances are sufficient yet to say anything publicly about how the timeline has perhaps been improved. One thing I keep reminding all the towns about too is that really what it will determine what locations will be served first may really depend on geography and not town boundary so much, depending on the engineering design. And I think as a communications union district member, we all need to be prepared for what turns out to be the most efficient and effective way to get to the people who need to be connected. And there's no way that an engineering study is going to avoid going through the town centers, to get to some of these distant locations. So, but that remains to be seen in negotiations. But where we were talking in the business plan before, Cora, correct me wrong, it could be extended for Putney maybe 5 years or longer, or 7 to 10 years for the whole county. That's really most estimates. Well, we don't have any proposals that are farther out than 5 years.
And if you can comment, Stephen, and I don't know whether this is fair or not, but would it be basically a requirement of the contract to have phase 1 completed before phase 2 was started, or can you imagine there being overlap?
No, actually, it's a very good question, Josh. Actually, there have been some discussions and considerations of a two-pronged approach or a two-front approach. I mean, we have a very large area here, and it really would not be on the realm of possibility to have, in terms of the contract for preliminary design and engineering. Of course, that would have to be a coherent approach. But in terms of the actual subsequent subcontracting bids, in some cases, for the actual hanging of the fiber, that might occur depending on the engineer's advice and efficiency and costs on two fronts simultaneously. two fronts are more expensive than one front, but it's possible that we'll have sufficient funding. I mean, talk to Mike Maricki about that. He's on, he has something to, maybe perhaps to advise you about that. But we are not counting our chickens before they hatch regarding the legislature. This is a legislative process. It's before the Senate. The governor has specifically proposed publicly that the Deerfield Valley Communications Union District, before Townsend joined, would have an allocation of $23 to $24 million. And that's based on the unserved population that we have, or the underserved. So, the money is quite significant in terms of that initial capital. And that's a far different position than when the WRC was doing the feasibility study, or we talked before as a board, before this board, a while back. But no, like I said, I got to be careful what I commit to, because we're just not in a position to be able to say that yet. But that is part of the negotiations as well, because the more money we have to borrow, that pushes up, our repayment costs for any bond and bonded indebtedness, or it might not be what you call a municipal bond. It might be out on the public market, or a private, what they call a private placement. There are mission-based investors out there, people that have pretty deep pockets that would like to see something happen, and they might be able to support this effort once we get clear about what the gap is between grant money and what we need to raise otherwise. That should all become clear pretty quickly, by the way. We certainly hope that we have a pretty clear idea of who how the public-private partnership will work out in terms of details of authority and funding and so forth. The contractual details and the timeline would probably follow shortly later in June, but we really intend to explore and pursue these negotiations hot and heavy here during this month. We're meeting 3 times a week. I mean, we're not, this is not a stall and delay action on our part. We're pressing these vendors to come forward with the goods.
It's my recollection, and I haven't heard this specifically stated tonight, but I think the reason that bond money is not available to the CUD is a statutory issue, isn't it? Is the legislature working on that or not?
Well, there certainly was some initial discussion by the House Energy and Technology Committee that I heard, but it really wasn't going anywhere. The legislators get together, even though they're meeting remotely now. They do talk, and they get a sense of what's going to fly and what isn't. And both of these bills, the first bill that was supposed to be, the governor allowed to become law, House H3 315. Gave actually some opportunity for pre-planning money to the CUDs, but that money has not yet been released because of some regulation or some administrative concern of the governor's office about making sure that this fits together with the money in the future in House 360. I'm just speculating about what might be happening, but things don't necessarily happen as fast as we would like, but we know the legislature can't meet forever, and they've got a decision to make. So I don't think it's a question of whether we'll have some funding. The question will be when, how fast, and how much.
I'd be interested in hearing, your reactions to the idea of a publicly owned and controlled fiber network versus working with private vendors. Just, if your thoughts along that, since we've been tossing around those ideas for a little while.
Well, how much, when we say publicly owned, how much skin in the game do we have when we say that? Are we obligated to perform maintenance? Are we just controlling costs and where fiber goes, or is it, how involved do we have to be if we go down that route.
Well, just I enjoyed hearing your conversation about your contract with the firm working on your sewage and water treatment and so forth. You know, you're a board. You're not the plumbers. You're not you're not doing that work yourself. That's really what the DV fiber CUD is. It's a board that provides oversight and fiscal control over the contracts and the fulfillment of the contracts that are you know, signed. And it will be in different stages. The pre-planning and the actual construction will probably be linked very closely together. The actual operation of the system, that is the maintenance you're talking about, Karen, and the customer service, then also goes over into the ISP, the Internet Service Provider, which may be two different contracts or may be the same firm. And one advantage of having a board, a public board, having authority over those decisions is that if the service isn't good or the terms of the contract are not satisfying the customers we're representing, then you know, we take legal action or we don't renew a contract. Just as, you know, you've been very satisfied with your contract regarding the sewage and water treatment, and you know you're pretty fortunate to have that kind of contractual relationship. So we certainly are seeking the same kind of thing in our negotiations with the vendors who proposed, you know, solutions to in response to our RFP. Did that answer your question sufficiently? You know, we're not going to have any employees, for example.
Okay.
We might end up
I won't
having.
be calling you when my phone goes out.
Yeah, well, there will be a number. You know, there will be a number to call, and it may not be me answering the phone, but you know, there's definitely has to be. But there's a great deal of attention by members of the board, and particularly the vendor committee and the communications committee. We have these three committees: a finance, a vendor, and a communications committee, about the customer service and the customer management of relations and complaints. You know, if we're not, I mean, one of the advantages of this structure, legal structure of the CUD, is if, you know, if the select board of Putney gets any complaints or whatever, and they feel like they're not getting what's due, you know, they withdraw from the CUD. I mean, there's no, you know, there's no reason to continue to lend support to something that isn't providing the service. And that's where the question of time, David, I think you asked about that, and when is it going to be built? I unfortunately can't answer at this point, except saying relatively we're in a quicker position than we, you know, we're in a sooner time frame than we were when we talked before. And certainly when we get to having to sign a public contract, that the terms of that contract will become public because it's a public-private arrangement, and then it will be clear what are the incentives, the requirements, the stipulations, the timeline, the penalties, you know, for fulfillment and non-fulfillment of terms, and actually who actually owns it in the end. If we have a vendor who is putting in millions and millions of dollars, they're likely to want to own it. And if we, on the other hand, have grants that are putting in millions and millions of dollars, the public ought to be owning it and controlling it. So that's what we, you know, I can't speak to because we don't have anything fixed yet. We're just, you know, in the back and forth stage of negotiations, and it isn't clear on our part how much money we really have yet. So that makes it, you know, gives us reason to pressure the legislature to get clear that up, you know. And even if it's on a timeline over a 3-year period, like the governor's proposal, you know, that's enough for us to make financial planning and make commitments.
Core, for me personally, I think it certainly seems like a publicly owned entity would make more sense because of its strength in numbers. But I you know, I think that still depends on all the details that come out in the negotiation process and what the model of ownership ultimately looks like. But I also, I guess I would lean on you, Core, to recommend to us whether I mean, it seems to me like probably the most logical thing to do for the select board at this moment is to follow these negotiations for a period of time. And I mean, not obviously they're not open negotiations, so we're not entitled to them at the moment, but to, you know, we have talked about whether we should be putting an RFP out on our own. It sounds to me like we might be better served to wait until we know what this is going to look like as a package and then decide whether it makes sense for us to seek private RFP responses. Does that sound right to you, Cor?
It's a great question. I know that's sort of an idea that we've been floating this whole time, is that we have these two options. I can see why the town would want to say, hey, what would happen if we went out on our own? And it certainly doesn't hurt to do so.
Right.
It certainly doesn't hurt to get that information and then say, okay, we've got these two options. You know, one is going to require us to have somebody on this governing board. It's going to require us to, you know, be part of a regional project and kind of take our turn and then not have any direct cost or liability. And one is we contract with the contractor, we get a job done, it's done, whatever happens, happens in the future with that company, whatever customer service we get is whatever we get, you know, but it's worth it for the trade-off in time. So that would be the town's decision to make.
Yep.
That's why I asked the question about timing, because this is what we were talking about before. And I think, Kim, actually, this was an idea that you had before about us getting our own information, because Consolidated is stringing cable right now in Putney, right?
Right.
Right.
Stephen, are you confident that when your negotiations are done, that the I guess the question is basically sort of how in depth is that completed negotiation going to be? I mean, are we going to, once that negotiation is complete, would we, the town of Putney, have a clear sense of where we were in the time frame, et cetera, and what the expense to us might be? And or so that's stuff that will come clear in this process, or in theory will?
Yeah, exactly. The timing will be, the money question is already answered. You don't have any money involved.
Okay, yeah.
The CUD is unable to negotiate anything that would cost the town money.
Okay.
Select boards have been asked to advise possible locations for a distribution cabinet, or that's been something that's been requested just in terms of preparing for planning in the future. But that doesn't mean the cost of that cabinet or the cost of that, you know, location is the town's. That's right. You know, in some cases, towns are, you know, have that available. You know, in Marlboro, one of the locations is the volunteer fire department, you know, company's place. But
I think that's Putney's as well right now.
You know, that varies from town to town. And then really, we just wanted to have a few locations possible so that an engineering plan and design would have some options, you know, that made sense from a cost efficiency and distribution perspective. Yeah, I don't, you know, the town of Putney, I certainly, you know, being a veteran from Marlboro's attempt, don't want to persuade you that it wasn't worth the effort to find out what we're getting involved with. If you want to take the time to do it, it is, you know, consumes a lot of time. The reason our board appointed a committee and empowered a committee to take care of it was because they didn't want to, you know, have to deal with all that. And they appointed an official committee so that we were obliged by open meeting law to, you know, post our meetings publicly, to report minutes, to go in executive session when we were talking about negotiations, to issue the RFP, and the board had to approve that, and so forth. So, you know, I'm just explaining, you know, the nuts and bolts about doing that kind of thing. it was instructive for us, and times have changed. So just because we had a certain number of deals cooking to consider back in January of last year, that might change quite a bit.
The other thing to remember is that Consolidated is stringing cable, but they're not going to every premise.
Right.
The fundamental mission of this project is go to every single premise.
Yeah, I might add something that is known, reported by Patrick Moreland in Brattleboro. He's the assistant manager, as you may know, that the build out of CCI is Consolidated is convinced that they can gain 30% of Comcast customers to shift over. And that's where the money is, in terms of the investment. And so that's why they're building in direct competition with Comcast in Brattleboro, and presumably they're doing the same thing in Putney, or even, I don't know, they may do the same thing opposing Duncan Cable in Wilmington, Dover area. That's the other area that we have that's cabled in the CUD. But Patrick says there's 700 locations in Brattleboro that will not be covered.
That makes sense.
Connected. And, Brattleboro was an early town to join the CUD because they saw the same issue that most towns have, and that is that they recognize the sparsely populated areas of our towns just aren't
going to get that service. Yeah.
Mass to make it work, and make the investors happy. So that's where the window of opportunity through this new municipal entity, the CUD, and its opportunity to secure grant funding and public investment debt-free is so encouraging.
Yeah. Karen.
So I have a question for you, Stephen. In the bids, does each town have a specific amount of money to build out their town? Is it broken up individually or not?
Well, the closest you can get to that is the cost analysis that was provided in the publicly available now in the WRC business plan.
Yep.
They did a cost for each town. It turns out to be pretty much a standard amount per mile.
Okay.
In terms of cost for construction. The real variable that is so critical to the success of reaching everybody is that when you get towards the end, where there aren't very many people on the road, that's where things get. But that business plan was based upon including everybody. It was inclusive of every. They went by the power lines, right? Sometimes they don't go exactly by the road, but anyway, road miles are a pretty close approximation in most of our towns. You give 10% or something different. So that's where the fiber goes. It's going to follow the poles. And if somebody has their own private poles or something going across a big piece of land, that's something that probably wouldn't be covered by the initial contract with CUD. It would have additional expense. And somebody that has conduit, they might have a problem if the conduit isn't big enough to take the fiber in addition to whatever else they got going in that conduit. So those are. But all of our negotiations will consider these proposals with a standard last pole to the house distance and the equipment inside, and that's to our either the private vendor or our interest, because if it's if the equipment used is of high quality and it's consistent, then the troubleshooting that the phone call is going to be about why doesn't it work is much easier to answer.
Right.
So that's a critical factor and a reason why we're optimistic about improved customer service resilience and dependability.
Thank you.
Yep.
Getting back to Karen there, when I say 33 million and we got 60 miles in Marlboro, you can divide that out and see kind of what it is. And there really isn't any free lunch, in terms of that kind of cost. it's pretty much an average business, proposition, no matter who your vendor is. The real question is who pays.
I seem to remember that Ernie from Southern Vermont Cable said you're generally talking ballpark 30,000 a mile, and I don't know whether that holds true and what it's based on, but somewhere in that range.
Well, there's an interesting. There's an interesting wrinkle since you're interested in those kind of details. The cost is different depending on who the vendor is, because if you're an incumbent carrier and you have already permit and ability to hang on that pole, that gives you certainly an advantage over another vendor. Now, Green Mountain Power, in fact, owns all the poles, and Green Mountain Power is under public PUC authority, and they certainly, the legislature, I think, has finished this bill, that they're volunteering a tariff, what they call a tariff. It's really a subsidy that they're throwing in $2,000 per unserved location, underserved location for make-ready costs, because after all, Green Mountain Power are the people that know the pole and know what the condition of the pole is, and would be called upon to, with any vendor, to have a one-stop, one examination, approval for the permit, and then follow up with the construction of actually hanging it at one time. The state is really making an effort to be more efficient about that, than it has been in the past, which when you have multiple owners and you have a lot of different cables on there from different companies, things can get really very dicey. And in most of our towns, that isn't an issue, but certainly Brattleboro, that can be a complication. I hope I haven't gotten in the weeds too much for you here, folks.
A little bit, but it's important. I mean, I think we're interested in the weeds, and I have one more question, and then I'm done. Ultimately, is the cost of service likely to be similar regardless of the path that's taken? I mean,
no, I'm glad you asked that. The projected cost of service in terms of base maintenance, operation, and service is pretty consistent across, regardless of who the vendor is. The real variable is how much. Let's just call that $50, okay? And that would include the maintenance, the customer service, the ISP and so forth, which means you're paying, a lease rate on dark fiber to get connected to Albany or to Boston and all that, the big internet. So say that's $50. Now, the model CUD in Vermont is EC Fiber, and they have an operator called ValleyNet. I can speak about this because this is all public. And the ValleyNet is the operator and the ISP. And ValleyNet is a not-for-profit corporation. Okay, so they have the ability in their contract to not have to worry about covering for a investment return, right, by the private investor. But they have built the whole project incrementally over time by private loans, by loans that are carrying an interest rate. And only recently have they moved those all over, the 41 million they're in debt, over to revenue bonds. And they've repaid all the previous, money they owed. So their cost for debt repayment is around $40, $45 a month per customer. And so they're really, sitting at $90. It's 100, it's great service. And, cable companies can't offer that symmetrical kind of service. And a lot of customers really aren't interested in being able to upload things a lot because all they're interested in is watching TV or movies or something, But I think the future economic development depends on being able to go up as well as down. Now, so with a publicly owned, in our case, depending on who the vendor is, the vendor may require a profit margin. If we worked with a not-for-profit vendor or a B corporation that doesn't have a boatload of what do you call it, venture capital involved, then we have the prospect of and the prospect of grant money. We have the prospect of holding down that additional cost beyond the base, the base level. No matter how much you're asking for, it's similar cost, because after all, once you have that fiber built, you have to connect it to the home and all that stuff done. It's this is not. It really doesn't cost anything more to open up the spigot to give you more bandwidth. So it's interesting. The reason I'm excited about this project is because I think it's the only way we're going to be able to hold down the entry-level cost for the general public. And the board is determined to, and already has formed, a small task force that's raring to go regarding private donation and charitable giving to ensure a subsidy, if necessary, for people of low income. Now, the legislature is talking about the same thing, but it means nothing to have this fiber network built if people can't get on it,
right,
and afford to get on it. So this is something that, in public, under a public board's authority, you got a pretty good chance of making sure that happens. If you're not in control of that, then we are going to leave ourselves vulnerable to, venture capitalists buying this company, buying that company, wanting to have more income and raising the fees. But that's part of negotiations.
Good.
But by the way, the business model estimates we have lately are that if you borrowed $1 million, it would cost 75 cents a month per customer. Given our broad, what we predict would be the take rate over this broad area, which is not 100% participation by any means. In some of our towns, there'll be 50% take rate because they think they can live without it, and in Marlboro, it's probably 50%. In some towns, it'll be less initially because they're served by somebody else.
Right.
That's part of the long-term cost averaging of indebtedness that we have to keep in mind.
That's where that public money will be key.
Well, yes, yeah, exactly, and where there'll be good value to the public in the end if we have control of it. I don't want grants to be going to some Wall Street venture capitalist advantage. Sorry, that's my biased opinion there. Pardon my frankness on that one.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I want to thank you all for an excellent discussion on this topic. I'm going to, in summary, address 2 points. The first one is the timeline. We are at a meeting of the Town of Putney Select Board, and our concern is the Town of Putney. As I have said before, I submit to you once again that our goal is broadband internet connected to every E911 address in Putney as soon as possible. Therefore, of course, we find out what the CUD has to offer, but as I have also said before, and has actually been supported, as I understood it, by Ms. Trowbridge this evening, we should go to RFPs with Consolidated Communications, and I have suggested also Comcast Xfinity and First Light Fiber, who all are doing business in Putney, to find out, so we can compare what is on offer. Regarding financing, there's been a certain amount of what I cannot think of another word, making it sound scary, venture capitalists. Wow, are they going to, is it going to be like barbarians at the gate they used to talk about with KKR? No, these people are looking to make money. And the only way they can make money is if they provide good service and people pay for it, which leads me to the second thing. Even if it's a communications union district, they are going to live or die not by financing, but by adoption rate. You run it everywhere, and either people don't take up your service or they take up a competitive service. You are in trouble. And Burlington Telecom, the debacle of Burlington Telecom is an example of how that winds up. It has been mentioned, I correspond with the executive director of the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank, and the reason is I'm trying to find out why they don't do telecommunications. And the answer, he says simply, is the legislature has not told us we can. They are allowed to do only what the Vermont General Assembly says they can do. But on the other hand, it bears mentioning EC Fiber has been mentioned. EC Fiber gets public financing versus the Vermont VEDA, the Vermont Economic Development Agency. So it's not a matter that public financing is not available. It's not available via the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank. Right. So that is a possibility. Now, finally, as I am professionally qualified to evaluate these, are the RFPs that the CUD has public documents?
Oh, yes.
How may I access them? Are they on the website?
Yeah. But if you can't find it, just contact me and I'll make sure the clerk sends it to you. Cora can do that, can have that done. We all have access to a copy of the 55-page RFP. That's what you're talking about, right, Mr. Fairman?
I would assume so. By the way, because we have not met before, I'm former telecommunications manager of Domtower, which back in the days had 18,000 employees and operated in Canada, the United States, and the UK. I'm also former network statistics and engineering economics at Bell Canada, the telephone company to a third of Canada's population. Yeah. And when I worked there, there were 52,000 employees. So, you know, I've been there and done that, and I will look these over and let you know what I found out.
Just the RFP that was proposed is public, not the responses.
Yeah, we can't reveal the, we have non-disclosure agreements in terms of the proposals we've received. Is that what you were asking for, or were you asking for the?
Of course I was.
Oh, well, I can't do that.
Okay, then fine. Then at this point, Mr. Chairman, we have no way of actually evaluating any service in comparing it to the CUD versus money. So the question would simply be, when can they put it in? Consolidated, and I'm not necessarily a partisan for consolidated, although full disclosure, I am a very satisfied consolidated customer, right? And I'm using their service right now. Consolidated is actually doing it right now, and if you look at their website, I've forgotten what their slogan is for it. They have a special name for it. Effectively, it's what Verizon calls fiber to the home. To find out what they're doing, Putney is Brattleboro and the towns surrounding Brattleboro, and Putney is one of those towns. To find out what they can do for us, probably sooner than the CUD can. Nothing against the CUD, but the bottom line is not whether we have public ownership and publicly supported customer service or whatever. It is that we get service to every E91 address in Putney ASAP. So, you know, let's do those RFPs to these other companies and compare everything and see where we wind up. Because we may be able to get service sooner than the CUD, or maybe we won't. But we won't know unless we get those other RFPs. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that one of the questions with that, as Stephen was pointing out, was the question of affordability in the long run. You know, and that's probably hard to estimate in this time. You know, I think that once I agree with you. I think we should pursue other RFPs in a timely fashion. I guess what I was getting at before when I asked about it was, is it worth waiting till we see what the CUD has? But if we have nothing to compare to, then that doesn't really make sense. So we probably ought to pursue them in parallel.
One thing I wanted to ask just before we go, and Stephen, thank you very much for being here to answer all those questions. That was really, really helpful.
Yes.
What's the best way for me to communicate with residents to kind of tell about the project? I'm ashamed to ask if we have a newsletter, because if we do, I don't get it. Is there a town newsletter?
There is.
It's relatively new, though.
Yes.
I mean, there's the town website, Putney. The mutual aid group has pretty good
Website.
ability to reach out.
There's a Facebook page. The I Love Putney Facebook page is pretty well circulated. There is I have had some feedback from residents that say they don't really know what's going on in town. So that's a separate issue that probably we need to talk about. But
you were saying that there is a newsletter, or there isn't?
There is.
Okay.
Alyssa does the newsletter every month.
Touch base with Karen about that, Cor. The other thing we ought to do, I mean, we could let Stephen go because I don't know whether he wants to listen to this, but the other thing we probably ought to do, whether that's sooner or later, is have more variations, whatever they would look like, on public forums to inform people, but until we have information to relay,
right.
There's a whole lot of value in that. Karen?
The board might want to consider an advisory committee, broadband.
Yeah.
That would be welcome.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to get more people, interested, and I think communication would be faster in the community.
Yeah, no, and in fact, having some sort of a open forum, some sort of a public forum to encourage that might be helpful. So that's something we can think about. But
yes.
All right, unless folks have other questions.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
Because the Putney newsletter came up, I should mention that I pay reasonably close attention to Putney civic affairs. I have never heard of the Putney newsletter, and I understood the town manager to say that a copy went out. I've never seen a copy, so perhaps the distribution needs to be increased.
Yes, or yeah. I mean, it's a new thing, so we're figuring it out. Right. But yes.
Alyssa, how does that get sent out?
So people can sign up on the website to get a copy of that. It goes to your email.
Okay. So the website is our main form of communication.
So
I will add Howard, though. Got him.
Well, thank you, Alyssa, but I'm glad this came up, because I bet I'm not the only one who did not know about this.
Yeah, no, and if we're going to have one, we probably, again, sorry, Stephen.
Great.
Thank you, Stephen, for being here.
And our newsletter.
I think that we should explore that, Karen, because if we're going to, email is not a particularly equitable way to get it out. So we should probably think about that.
Especially if they don't have broadband or internet access at all.
Exactly.
Good point, Eileen.
All right. Well,
excuse me, John. We have a paper version in Marlboro.
Well, that's what we probably, and I don't think we probably want to mail something, but we should have it available.
It's an expense, but not everybody's on the internet. And the other thing I just wanted to let you know, the reason Cora asked this question about communications, because she serves very ably on the communications committee. And the communications committee is very, very much interested in making sure the reps have access or know how they can best communicate with the public they're representing in each town. It's very important to keep that link and that two-way communication going so that we can best serve the greater good. Thank you.
And as my final word with my BCTV hat on, I want to give a shout out to Austin Rice behind the scenes, recording for BCTV, and thanks everybody for having us.
Definitely.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you too, Cora, and thank you, Stephen. That was very helpful.
Thank you both.
I just have a quick question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And Karen, I'm happy to support this in any way, or Alyssa. I'm curious on running a campaign for signing up for that newsletter, as it is the only way we have right now of just getting that out, sending that link to everybody, like, hey, getting that out there. I don't know how I can support that or if that's helpful, but
Thank
that's
you.
great.
Yeah, no, we should definitely think about how to get that wider spread. And thank you also. I think this has been something that Alyssa has worked on and wanted to make happen. So thanks, Alyssa, for getting it going. And now we have to figure out how to make it take off. So, all right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Cora. Have a good night.
All right.
Good night, Cora. Thanks.
Good night.
All right. Well, we didn't move through that maybe as quickly as we could have, but that was useful, definitely. So, the town manager's report.
So I just want to report quickly on Summer Matters grant application and the collaboration I've been doing with Emily Zervis at the library, Ruby McAdoo with Putney Cares, and I can't recall her name, but also working with Putney Food Shelf. Not Hannah, but there's somebody else.
Nancy, is it Nancy Olson?
Nope, not Nancy. There was a different name, and I can't recall what it was. But anyway, the four of us pulled together.
Ellen Straub? No?
No, pulled together we pulled together this application. It was due today. So the minimum amount that we could request is $20,000. But between the four entities, we were able to do it. And what it involves is kids. So anything to do with kids, programs, summer programs for kids. So we're looking at, like, for the pool, possibly if the grant comes through, that we would have free swim, free swim lessons, and there's going to be a food program throughout the summer for the kids. And then Emily's got some programs that she wanted to do for the summer with the kids as well. So we all worked together. We pulled it together in 2 days. And it was submitted this evening. So I will keep you posted on that.
Right.
I just want to say it was a good experience to work with all three of these individuals. And with a short deadline, we were able to pull it off. So PACIF Grant is about $10,000 that we can request. With the PACIF Grant, it's 50% that they'll allocate. Working with the library, they're looking to get security cameras at the library. And Tom is, if he's going to purchase any more fire gear. And I always ask Brian too for, like, road signs. So I'll put that package together and send it to the state.
So you said 50%, so that's a 50% match. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, good.
So
And-
if I put in, what I try to do, Josh, is, put in for the whole $10,000.
Yeah.
Because it's up to 10,000, and then we would end up with 5,000, and then I just split it up amongst, whoever submitted something.
Sounds good.
It doesn't take care of the whole cost, but, security cameras at the library is like $3,300.
Yeah.
So if we can get half of that, it's, it's a start. It helps.
Is it a reimbursement?
Match on the Summer Matters grant? Sorry, David.
I just wondered if it was a reimbursement. You put in for what programs you want, pay for it, and then they send the 50% of what it costs, or do they give you the money up front?
No, so what I do, David, for the PACIF Grant is I send invoices, not invoices, excuse me, quotes.
Gotcha.
So I send the quotes. with the application, and then they'll approve or disapprove, or they'll request more information. But usually, so Wade Mashore, who's our passive representative, I met with him last week, and he's like, yeah, put in for the grant. He goes, it's on a rolling basis right now. Usually it's spring and fall. They award twice a year, and you can only get one award each year. But he says, yes, definitely put in for that grant. So we're going to go ahead with that.
Good. The Summer Matters grant, is there a match to that as well or not?
No, that is like,
Full grant.
yes, yeah.
And you mentioned the minimum was 20, and what's the maximum, like 75 or 100?
You know something? I don't know. I didn't see the max number.
Okay.
So,
Sounds good.
no, David, we can't use it to pay for the repair of the pool.
That was just a thought, okay? People are giving out money. We got plenty of places to use it, okay?
Don't think I didn't think about it, but we can't use it for that.
Good try.
The other item on my town manager's report is the website and communication in Putney. And I heard Vanessa Vadim in that last select board meeting in the public hearing, how, people are disconnected right now with town government. So Alyssa and I kind of, we revisited the website and we changed some things on it. So it might be a little easier to follow where things are. We will be talking to the web designer too. We can upgrade our website. It's going to cost some money, but we'll take a look at it. And if it's within our budget, then I would probably just go ahead and do it. But the biggest thing about our website is when you open it, you see this picture, and you have some menus up top. And no one knows to scroll to the bottom for more information. So we can change that. It's just going to cost us a little more money. And we can look at other website designers, but then we're going to have to transfer all our information to a new company. And if we don't have to do that, I would just rather keep the one we have and see if we can improve it more.
Yeah, I stumbled on the new format by accident, and I think it reads much better than it did. I know that program, was it OpenGov that we're using?
Yes. Yeah.
The back end is not all that intuitive, so kudos to all of you who've figured out how to rearrange everything without breaking stuff. So I mean, if there's an update that specifically makes the back end a little bit easier to navigate, I'm for it. I have to update the Brattleboro site, and it's just a bear.
Yes.
So because we use the same program, so if there's anything that makes it easier for us to get information out, I think we should do that.
Okay. And you're an IT person, and I'm like,
no.
The only other thing I want to mention in my town manager's report is, so we have underground storage tanks, UST tanks, one at the fire station and one at the highway garage. So those have been on hold because of COVID.
Yep.
And as of May 13th or 14th, the firehouse tank will be dug up and pulled out of the ground. And then shortly after, the highway department, theirs will be done as well. So Tom and Brian are overseeing that, along with the engineer. That's required by the state.
Those are diesel tanks?
Yes.
Okay. And who's digging them up? Do we know?
Brian's gonna be doing it.
And then how do they get handled?
I don't know how I don't have any details about who handles it or anything like that.
Do we know if
There's
empty?
direct oversight by the state engineer, David Bach. Our tanks will be removed. It doesn't say where they're gonna be going. So I
Yeah.
will ask that question because if they're gonna be dug up, I would think they have to go off-site somewhere for insurance reasons.
Yeah, don't those leave a lot of sludge in the bottom too?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a pretty tightly controlled process, so I'm sure they'll manage it well.
Yep.
But, I think that the bigger concern, and hopefully this won't be the case, is if either of them has had a leak. But
Right.
that's not the case. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Mr. Fairman.
I would respectfully suggest to our excellent town manager that if we don't know where the tanks are going, we should find out, and we should have that in writing and be sure that the state's engineer agrees with what is proposed. Because otherwise we can wind up with tanks sitting there until somebody figures out what to do next.
Correct. Thank you.
I'm guessing Brian and Tom have already figured that out, but thank you. Yes, we'll follow up on that and make sure. David?
How many gallons are those tanks? 1,000-gallon tanks?
Ballpark, I think. I can't remember whether they're 500 or 1,000, but
Trying to get a picture of how big they are. Yep.
I think about 1,000, but I can't.
Yeah.
Karen, since you mentioned it, but it's not on your report, pool, do we know anything more about bids or people looking at the pool?
Yeah, we have received one bid already. So the bids are due May 21st.
Okay, so we still have, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember where we were in that time frame. So.
And this is just for repair, right? Not for
Well,
replacement.
no, it's for repair and or, pull out
Oh, okay.
fiberglass, whatever they recommend, Eileen.
Yeah.
We'll take a look at all of them and then decide. Hopefully we get more than one, but we'll see what happens.
And hopefully we get someone who can do it this year, but that's maybe just too optimistic. But that would be really nice.
Well, no, we might be able to pull that off, David.
Great.
I'm being optimistic.
There you go. All right.
If we have free swimming at the pool, we're gonna have that pool.
We better have a pool.
All right. Anything else, Karen? Are you all set?
Just two quick things. Planning Commission had a meeting last night. In the town plan, there is a request for agricultural advisory committee and an economic development advisory committee. Not to be adding committees and trying to find volunteers. I would like to put that on Putney to see if we can get some volunteers for these committees. I will put a description of the roles and the tasks that are required and keep the select board informed.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you're all set on town manager?
Yes.
So other business, I just wanted to, I had a complicated week last week, so I was unable to meet the equity and inclusion working group did not meet last week, and then Aton was not able to meet this week. So we have a meeting scheduled for next week. And Karen, I'm going to ask you to warn that for us. I don't have it in front of me, but I'll let you know. I think we're thinking Wednesday. Swift, if you're on, Swift would know right when it is, but it's next Wednesday.
Swift left.
Anyway, I'll be in touch with you about that, Karen. But
Okay.
also, we did, just as per Fletcher's request, we did that we forwarded Fletcher the statement from Salmon and Nostrand. So that's a public document if anybody's interested. And it was about council's comment on the nature of the advisory committee. And then I have reviewed the statement, and I know that Eileen that was made by Barra, and I think that at some point we, the select board, need to revisit whether we want to either make an additional statement or whether we're okay with the statement that was put out still being out there, because we have not rescinded that statement. It was not, it has been pointed out that that statement was not officially adopted by the select board, and so whether there's rescission necessary or not would be a different question. But so that's where we are on equity and inclusion, and we will be meeting next week and working on figuring out next steps for the charge. All right. Any other business? All right. Hearing none. Do we need an executive session?
We do not.
Okay. So our next meeting will be this same time, this same venue, 2 weeks from tomorrow. We have an additional meeting
Tomorrow night.
But that's executive session.
Correct.
And so otherwise our next regular meeting is 2 weeks from tonight.
May 19th.
May 19th at 5:30 p.m.
Correct.
So if there's nothing else, a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
And if there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Karen.
One.
Thank you, Alyssa.